Hey there, YouTube. Please help us out by liking this video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Our position previews recap plus a new intro song for 2022 are up next.
Welcome to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast from CBS Sports.
And first pitch crushing. Deep left field. This is way back. Walk the ball.
Got a fantasy question? Email fantasybaseball@cbsi.com. Get ready to win your league.
Where fantasy becomes reality.
Now here's Frank, Scott, and Chris.
Whoa there. Welcome to March and welcome to Fantasy Baseball Today. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. We did all of those long position previews over the past few weeks. So today we're going to recap each of them. Plus, we're going to give you our favorite player to target at each of those positions. We'll also have updates on the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational and the labor negotiations. Just saw another update there, so we'll get to that. But first, what did you guys think of the new intro? Snazzy, huh?
Yeah. I noticed there's not a certain name in the intro anymore.
That guy big timed us. That guy was like, "Oh, I'm too good for this show."
I like that his removal creates more inflection on Chris. Did you notice that? It was like, and Chris.
Frank, Scott, and Chris.
Chris.
Yeah, so when we were making it, they kept asking me the order of the names. And I'm like, I don't know. I guess Frank, Scott, and Chris sounds the best. You say them all out loud. Chris, Scott, and Frank.
You know, the famous person who is not the star is listed last usually, right?
Well, that's so it depends, because you can get different types of credits. The famous person who gets the starring Frank and Scott with Chris would be how you
but there's also and.
Yes.
And.
I don't.
Yes.
I didn't. Yeah, no. It's fine. We could have gone alphabetical order. That would have been cool. Instead,
Chris,
we went
Frank and Scott.
Literally the least alphabetical order possible.
Chris.
It's fine. It's fine, guys. I know where I stand.
That's how my son says Chris, by the way. He says Chris.
That is how my nieces say it.
Yeah.
Chris.
I'm going to start introducing you like that. Chris.
Yeah.
By the way, I was going to text Adam Azer, former host of this podcast earlier, and say, you know what, man? You really chose the perfect time to leave a fantasy baseball podcast. If we're being perfectly honest, I step in, got like 3 or 4 months of filler as we lead up to a shortened season throughout the pandemic. Last year was fun, but of course, sticky substance, changing the ball around. It's been a crazy couple of years in baseball, and I guess that's a good place to start, right? Just get people caught up on the labor negotiations. Yeah, you're not wrong, Scott. The latest is that the players and the owners just met for a 7th time at Roger Dean Stadium out in Florida, and they've now been meeting together for 12 hours and counting. So they started, at 10 a.m. on Monday morning, and we're recording this, just after 10 p.m. at night. So I don't know. It seems like they are determined. There's been some optimism, but then there's also been reports that they're still far off on a lot of things. So I don't know. Scott, what's your read of the situation? Maybe by the time people are listening to this in the morning when they wake up, I mean, there either could be a resolution or just an update that the season will be delayed. But as of now, we just
Well, it could be all number of things. I was as the most pessimistic I've been so far this weekend, when basically the players showed a willingness to come down on the CBT, which is competitive balance tax. I believe that's what that stands for, right? The players showed a willingness to come down, and the owners didn't move it at all, basically zero. And that makes it seem like not really a negotiation, right? One side is saying this is the line, take it or leave it, and the other side has to take it or leave it. So I kind of thought the players would leave it at that point and just back away from the negotiating table and try to wait out the owners, but that clearly hasn't happened because they've had this marathon negotiating session here on Monday. So, the fact that they're still meeting, I think can only be a positive, but I would not say that I'm optimistic there's going to be a deal done tonight either.
Yeah, it seems like they're going to be working this late into the night. There is a tweet that I'm seeing here from Andy Martino. Growing optimism, CBT tax penalties can be negotiated back toward old status quo levels. Unclear if draft picks will still apply to highest levels of spending. This major issue is seeming workable all of a sudden. First threshold expected to land around 225 to 230 million. So that's actually pretty massive news. Apparently the biggest holdup is whether to expand the playoffs to 12 or 14 teams right now. So I saw somebody else point this out on Twitter, and maybe I'm naive, but if they're working this hard, this late into the night, I think that's really good news. So
right.
Like, why would they be working this hard if they really thought something was not going to happen?
If they weren't getting anywhere,
right,
then they would have just called it off by now. I would think. What do I know? I'm just seeing clips on Twitter of people walking through a parking lot. So.
It's like, that's what we've come to, right? This is sports reporting. We've got videos of Rob Manfred. We're working on it. All right. Well,
see,
thanks,
this is y'all's first, like labor negotiations coverage. I'm assuming we haven't really had a lockout or a strike in a professional sport since. I guess there was one in hockey in like 2013, but I don't, it's hockey. I don't care about it. And none of the other people on this podcast do, is what I'm saying. If you care about hockey, that's great. I get my score notifications for the Florida Panthers. That's about it. But among the sports I care about, or the sports we talk about, among the three of us, the last one was basketball in 2010, 2011. And I remember like late night sessions for, I feel like, several weeks before they really ironed it out. So I don't know, man. It still seems like they're really far apart. Like MLB's CBT proposals that we saw tonight were like 35 million or 40 million, and the players' last one was still like 120 million or something. So that was the bonus pool. The CBT, I think they're still like 25 million apart. So it's like, I'm not optimistic. And it's hard for me not to remember that one side has made it very clear, very publicly, 2 out of the past 3 years, that they are fine with having fewer baseball games. That has been their negotiated position. And that is the owners. And so as long as they're saying we're fine missing games, I don't know how you can be optimistic. Like, I don't know how you can say, oh, this would be horrible for the sport, but also we're ready. We'll do it. Right. And it's like, all right, well, I don't know. I would be shocked if we had baseball in early April, but I hope to be shocked. Being shocked is fun.
Chris, do you have people playing Twister in another room or something like that? Because
I've got some friends over. I can tell them to be quiet if we need to, if it's bothersome. But we've got like 3 dogs in the living room, 2 cats, like 4 adult human beings. Too? Yeah, and everybody's playing Twister. Yeah.
That's what I figured. Yeah, it sounded pretty raucous there in the background. So
a hot spot.
I haven't played Twister in so long, but maybe I've got to fire it up. All right, we're gonna pass on the labor negotiations.
I feel like Twister as an adult would be weird.
Yeah. I mean, you lose your flexibility the older that you get.
I wouldn't be able to.
Just not do anything.
Straight up, like I just would not. I got bad hips, man.
Yeah. Well, you probably shouldn't be playing flag football then. Anyway, let's get into our TGFBI teams.
Excuse you. First place, 5-1.
All right.
3 touchdown passes, 3 receiving touchdowns on the season, going into the playoffs this week, sir.
Prove me wrong. Keep doing it. Keep doing your thing, Chris. Whenever there is an update on the labor negotiations, if there's breaking news, I'm sure we'll do some kind of emergency podcast. So until then, the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational, I mentioned this on yesterday's podcast. These are 15-team 5x5 roto leagues where you're also competing for an overall prize against a bunch of other people in the industry. So I think there's 14 or 15 different 15-team roto leagues that are basically all playing against each other. Scott had the 5th pick in his league. Chris had the 11th, and I had the 2nd overall pick. Scotty, where you at? Did you actually make your 4th round pick? Because I know you were debating.
I did. I was agonizing over it as we were doing the mic check here. So the draft it's been, there've been some strange happenings here. Okay. So I was first in the Kentucky Derby style, selection of the draft pick. Right. And with the first choice, I went 5, because I do think for roto leagues, there are 5 standout hitters, and I was okay with any one of them. I got Vladimir Guerrero. The other 4 went 1 through 4, and I got Vladimir Guerrero, which is fine because I had Guerrero ranked 2nd of the 5. So I was happy with that.
Yeah.
And then in round 2, which is, what pick is that overall? 26? Because it's a 15-team league. The 26th overall pick, Freddie Freeman, was still there.
That's
wild. Yeah, I mean, that's an automatic pick, right? Except I took Vladimir Guerrero in round 1, so I'm going to use my first 2 picks on a first baseman.
Yes.
Ultimately, I decided yes. Yeah, I just couldn't pass up the value and the assurance that Freddie Freeman offers. The other choices, I think, it would have been between Shane Bieber or Cedric Mullins. So when you line up the names, it becomes pretty obvious you got to take Freeman there. So yeah, started my draft with 2 first basemen, and then in round 3, Salvador Perez. I have that Salvador Perez rule where I'm always going to take him in round 4 if he's available. In a 15-team league, I don't think it's reasonable to think he's going to be available in round 4. So I took him with my 3rd pick at 35 overall. And then with my 4th pick just now, I came within 2 spots of getting Austin Riley, who was the only guy I considered apart from Salvador Perez with that 3rd round pick. And that would have been so choice if he had made it back to me in round 4, 56th overall. But he didn't. Fell 2 picks short. So I went with Kevin Gausman. It's my first starting pitcher. My highest ranked pitcher who was available was Charlie Morton. But of course, Charlie Morton goes a lot later than I rank him. That's why I've hyped him up this whole preseason as my favorite pitcher to draft. So I went out of order to take Gausman, hoping I can either get Morton with my next pick in round 5 or maybe even really roll the dice and take him in round 6, which would be 86th overall. That's about his ADP. So it's possible, but obviously I'm pushing my luck if I think he's a lot more valuable than his ADP. So yeah, no stolen bases yet through 4 rounds. And there has been high demand for them. I mean, Tyler O'Neill and Javier Baez, who aren't projected to give you that many steals anyway, they both went in the middle of round 3. But that's fine. The 0 SB strategy, being intentionally unintentional about drafting stolen bases, I am forging ahead with it, and I am okay finishing in the bottom of the 3rd of the league in that category. So we'll see how it goes from here. But I wish I could have gotten a better number 1 than Gausman, but I just feel like the way starting pitcher was being depleted, I had to go ahead and take my first one there and not put all my eggs in the Charlie Morton basket.
All right. I'm interested to see how your team turns out. I appreciated your tweet calling out Heath Cummings, his former strategy, the NIPS strategy, no intentional position strategy. So you had to draft the best players
with 2
available.
first basemen. I mean, clearly, that's clearly what you're doing.
Yeah.
Get a load of these nips, Heath.
You got the 2 best in Vlad and Freddie Freeman. Chris, you had the 11th overall pick in your.
Sorry, I know I talked for a long time already, but
go ahead.
Pete Alonso was there with the 4th pick, and I would have liked to take him, but I couldn't take 3
You should have done it.
You
should have done it.
Just do it.
That would have been insane.
All the power.
I would have been so stressed the rest of the draft.
Chris, I know you had the 11th overall pick. How's your draft going?
Really, really well, I think, because Ronald Acuna fell to me at number 11 overall, and I was picking between him and Mookie Betts, and I decided to go with Ronald Acuna. It's a 15-team league, so the replacement options aren't going to be as good. That's a downside to taking the riskier injury risk player, but he's also potentially the number one player. And that's also true of Mookie Betts. But I think the path is probably clearer for Ronald Acuna, assuming that he's still a big source of stolen bases. I think there's risk with both Mookie Betts and Ronald Acuna, but I think Ronald Acuna is a better bet for that. And then with my second overall pick, with the 5th round and the 2nd round, Mike Trout was still there. So that was a fairly easy call because, look, I know it's a taking on a lot of risk overall, adding those 2 guys with the top 2 picks, but like they're 2 of my top, I think they're 2 of my top 10 players in Roto, if not top 8.
Acuna definitely tons of risk, but I think the risk for Trout is totally overblown. I mean,
yeah, no, I agree with that. So yeah, it's
what's interesting is now that you've taken Acuna in a high profile league like this, you kind of have you're not rooting for the season to be delayed, but it would help.
It wouldn't hurt.
Sure, if it was delayed.
Yeah, I mean, he could be ready for the normal opening day. We don't know. That's one of the downsides of not having any spring training right now, is that we just have had no updates
from him, the player himself, and they tend to be the most optimistic of anybody. He was only aiming for May. So
yeah. And hey, that'd be great. That would be perfectly fine with me. Although I'm not rooting for a shortened season either way. Then I get back to the 3rd round, and we talked about in the starting pitcher preview how I want one of those anchor starting pitchers, and there were 2 left in my opinion. There was Aaron Nola and Sandy Alcantara, but there was also Salvador Perez at 41 overall.
Yeah,
I couldn't pass it up. I mean, I know I have, there's some risk of Salvador Perez being a disappointment. There's risk in investing in a 30-year-old catcher, and especially one who catches as much as he does, who had Tommy John surgery not that long ago. But yeah, the value was too good. The edge that I would get if all 3 of those guys are healthy is just, it's ridiculous. I mean, Ronald Acuna and Mike Trout could be top 5 players, and Salvador Perez could be if he does what he did last season, which I don't think he will, he was a top 5 player, a top 5 hitter, or very close to that. So yeah, it was just, I'll figure out.
He started 40 games at DH last year. So I think the idea of him catching a lot of games, like he may be transitioning out of that phase of his career,
especially with because two good catching prospects in their organization. Right? 2?
I think
just
one.
At least one. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's good because they're giving him those at bats at DH still. So that even gives him a safer path to playing time than before. And I was looking at his numbers again the other day. Perez, you know what his X home? We never talk about expected home runs, but Statcast has an X home run stat. It was like 52, 53.
That's the thing, is he did it in one of the hardest. He did it in one of the hardest parks for home runs. Kansas City Kauffman Stadium is routinely, if you look at a player's expected home runs, that's they do it by park. If they had played every game in every park, that's routinely among the smallest numbers for most players. So if he's anywhere close to what he was last season, he's going to be a huge edge at catcher. So
I've said before, I think 2/3 of last year's production. I mean, that puts him at 32 home runs, 80 RBI from a catcher.
I think that would be pretty close to Will Smith. It's just a playing time gap. Will Smith's probably not going to get, like, prorated. It's probably pretty close between those two.
Prorated.
But Salvador Perez might get 100 plate appearances more.
Right.
Salvador Perez's expected home runs, if he played all of his games in the Chicago White Sox ballpark, I don't remember the name of it, would have been 60.
Guaranteed rate field.
Guaranteed rate field.
Crushed the ball.
60 home runs.
There was nothing fluky about that home run total last year. Not that I'm saying he's going to repeat it, because it was historic. You don't count on history happening 2 years in a row, but I mean, like, the skills definitely back it up.
All right. I'll quickly hit on what I've done so far. I had the 2nd overall pick. I actually really wanted Trey Turner because I already have another team with Fernando Tatis, and I like to diversify with my early round picks. Obviously, there is some risk involved with drafting Tatis. So, of course, Trey Turner went 1st overall. So I selected Fernando Tatis. I debated taking Jose Ramirez just to make sure that I got that 3rd baseman, but I'm like, nah, give me the upside. I'm taking Fernando Tatis. Came all the way back to my 2nd round pick. A few different players that I was debating here, but I wound up going with Tim Anderson. So I know, Scott, you probably don't love that pick, but giving me that base of batting average and speed, and don't really have to worry about it much more, at least for the foreseeable future in this draft. I like getting that, and probably looking at drafting some more power here. I wanted Yordan Alvarez. He went one pick after me, so right at the turn, I'm okay taking your time. Like, if you're in a slow draft, you want to take your time, that's fine. But if you're at the turn and you make one of your picks within, let's say, 30 minutes, and then you use another hour on your next pick, that's frustrating. So we are over an hour that this gentleman has been on the clock. So make your pick, bud. That's all I'll say. But
maybe he started podcasting.
Maybe. Fernando Tatis and Tim Anderson for me, my first two picks. Let's get into position previews, recap, and we'll start with catcher, but there might not be much more to add because you guys just talked about both drafting Salvador Perez in the third round of this 15-team league. I think for this season, more of the same of what we've seen in years past. There are some prospects on the way that are going to help the position, but I think more so in 2023. So if some of these prospects, they get their feet wet, then maybe they're full-time players come next year. I think that will really help the position. But for this year, catcher is still, not great. It's pretty shallow, I would say, compared to all the other positions, but it always is. So, Scotty, where are you at on catcher, and what is your strategy? Let's start in a two-catcher league, which is most roto leagues.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, Salvador Perez, we got into quite a bit already, but I do want to stress that, like, he is what makes the position different this year from previous years. I feel like there hasn't been a catcher worth drafting as early as him for a decade plus. Some may have been drafted as early as him, but they didn't really deserve to be the way he does. I think he's the biggest advantage you could have at any position. I have him 2 tiers ahead of any other catcher. And that's why if ever he's available in round 4, I'm going to take him. And a lot of times I'll consider taking him in round 3. So very big on drafting Salvador Perez this year, regardless, one catcher or two. I think it's actually even more beneficial to do it in a one catcher league, though, because usually you're talking about smaller lineups and you want to get as much impact as you can out of every lineup spot. Beyond that, I don't really put a lot of emphasis on the position. Probably my second most drafted catcher who isn't one of the late rounders is like Dalton Varsho, if he happens to be around in like round 10 or something. I think there's a lot of upside there because he's going to spend a lot of his time in the outfield, hopefully get more bats than the average catcher for that reason. And he's the only catcher who has a chance of contributing a worthy number of stolen bases. So he's probably my second most drafted catcher. I don't think Real Muto or Will Smith are worth paying up for the way Salvador Perez is. But if I don't have reason to take Dalton Varsho, if I miss out on Salvador Perez, I am probably just taking the best of what's available, whether it's one catcher league or two. It often ends up being Mitch Garver. I feel like he has the most upside of those late round choices by a considerable margin, actually. It's just a question of how much playing time he gets, but I'll roll the dice because it's not like you're investing much in it. But, if it doesn't end up being him, it ends up being Joey Bard or Keber Ruiz or, even in those two catcher leagues, I'm okay beginning the year with Mike Zunino, who hit the second most home runs of anyone at the position last year. It's just generally not wise to invest a lot in that position unless you're sure that it's going to be somebody who stands out from the crowd.
I do feel pretty good about the top 5, 6, if you want to include Varsho. I'm a little bit more worried about him myself, but yeah, I want to get one of those top 5, regardless of format. One catcher, I want an impact bat at the position, as you mentioned, Scott. If it's a 2-catcher league, I still want one of those top 5, and then I'll dive back in later on. Elias Diaz, Omar Narvaez, those are guys that, I don't know how much they're going to help you, but I don't think that they hurt you either. So I like to target those guys as my second catcher. But yeah, really trying to get one of those top 5 if I can. Chris, your strategy in, let's say, a one catcher league. Scott kind of touched on both of them, but this is most head-to-head style leagues, head-to-head points, head-to-head categories usually only start one catcher. What's your strategy there?
Yeah, I think in a one catcher league, Salvador Perez and Will Smith are probably the only ones I would pay up for, because they're the only ones that I think have real potential to perform like a non-catcher. And ultimately, when you're talking about this position, that matters a lot, I think, because once you get past those two, and like maybe Yasmani Grandal walks 120 times again and he produces that way, or maybe we see an increase, an improvement from JT Realmuto after a little bit of a down season or something like that. But in a head-to-head points league, yeah, I think I'm only really taking one of the early ones just because I know I can get Mitch Garver with one of my last picks in a head-to-head points league, and I think he'll be fine for that format with a one-catcher league. So that's probably the way I'm approaching it. And even in a roto league, I don't know if I'm going to pay up for Real Muto. I don't know if I'm going to pay up for Wilson Contreras. They kind of feel like just guys to me.
Certainly in roto, I could see paying up for Real Muto in a points league.
With the playing time that he gets, yeah, maybe
the playing time, and he has nicer peripherals than most catchers and gets a lot of doubles and whatnot. But
yeah, but like the middle class of the position, like Varsho, I think is worth it in roto. But after that, like I'm gonna wait if I don't get someone at that high end because I don't see much reason to pay up for Tyler Stevenson or any of those guys. So yeah, I think it's still a pretty bad position.
Yeah, Grandal is actually the one that I find myself targeting most. I really like what he did last year. Absolutely crushed the ball, and he was on fire down the stretch. Walk rate was insane. So if you're playing a head-to-head points league or any type of OBP format, Grandal is going to be fantastic there. But even in a basic 5x5 roto league, he's consistent. He's going to hit 240 to 250, mid-20s home runs. Counting stats should be good in a very strong lineup with the White Sox as well. So Grandal is the one that I find myself targeting most. Scotty, I'm going to assume that is Salvador Perez for you.
Yep.
And Chris, the catcher you find yourself targeting most?
Probably Mitch Garver.
Mitch Garver. All right, let's move on to first base. We have a few super studs up top, and Scott has both of them on his team, by the way. Again, Vlad and Freddie Freeman. Big power. After that, you see that tier of Matt Olson and Pete Alonso. But overall, it's a deep position with viable options, including the profit pocket, which if you listen to our first base preview, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Chris, what is your first base strategy this season?
Draft Luke Voit late is a big part of it. I'm ending up with him in pretty much every league I'm doing. He's a top 12 first baseman for me because I'm just assuming he's going to play somewhere. But yeah, this is a position where I'm perfectly happy to take one of the early round guys. I'm perfectly happy to take one of the middle class guys. And I'm perfectly happy to wait. I'm getting a lot of Max Muncy, a lot of Joey Votto. I think there's some really good values at the position this year. So it is, it's probably the position that I worry about least. It's like the position that I'm taking the least like conscious decision-making process about because you can just, I think you'll be happy no matter where you go.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartily. I mean, I've been in drafts where, I'm considering a first baseman early, but oh man, it looks like a tier is ending at another position. And then you remind yourself, well, there's a lot of usable first basemen later on. Josh Bells, the Rhys Hoskins, Joey Vottos, of course, guys that we all like this season. So Scotty, What do you find yourself doing? What's the strategy here at first base?
I am going to have a lot of Vladimir Guerrero just by virtue of him being my number 2 player in both scoring formats. It's a different number 1. I have Juan Soto number 1 in points and Fernando Tatis and Roto, but Vladimir Guerrero is my number 2 in both. So, not many people have him ranked that high. So I'm going to have a lot of Guerrero just because of that. If I'm picking at the 1-2 turn, I'm going to take Freddie Freeman probably with one of those picks because I have him ranked higher than the consensus, it would appear, as well. So there's a good chance I'll have a lot of him too. That doesn't happen, though, if I don't get one of them early. And it's not a position scarcity thing for what it's worth. I just think they're super productive in everything but stolen bases. But if it doesn't happen, then I'm probably waiting for that profit pocket, that foursome of Joey Votto, CJ Cron, Josh Bell, and Rhys Hoskins, especially in points leagues, because Votto and Hoskins, they're best suited for points leagues because of how much they walk. Which isn't to say they're not good in roto, but especially in points leagues. And also because in points leagues, you're typically talking about a no corner infield spot in the lineup, right? Just first baseman, just the starting 9. So like in a roto league, I might take Pete Alonso, and if he's there in round 5, and I'm trying to not underdo it in the home run category, especially this year, I might take Pete Alonso because I know it doesn't block me from reaching into that profit pocket still. And that pretty much sums it up. I don't have a lot of interest in Matt Olson or Paul Goldschmidt or Jose Abreu. I'm probably just going to let them go to somebody else unless the value is outrageous.
I do like Paul Goldschmidt quite a bit. I mean, he is the one, if I am targeting one early on, I like Alonso as well. I think he could set you apart in the power categories. Paul Goldschmidt, though, just rock solid across the board. And you look at the batting average throughout his career, 286 or better, basically every season outside of the shortened 2020. So I trust what we saw from him last year. The StatCast numbers were career bests for Paul Goldschmidt last year. And then if I miss out on him, of course, I like the profit pocket. The one that I like most is Rhys Hoskins. He got off to a slow start last year, but he took off in July. He hit 27 home runs total in just 107 games. Of course, he's got to stay healthy, but that was a really strong home run pace that we saw last year. And you mentioned how great he is in points leagues. He's got 3.2 fantasy points per game. That was tied for 8th best at the position last year.
I want to mention the reason I singled out Alonso there is because of that tier, he tends to last the longest. I don't prefer Alonso to Olsen. If for some reason Alonso goes earlier and Olsen slips to round 5, okay, then I will take Olsen. So I didn't mean to single out Alonso there. It was more just I like the value that Alonso tends to provide based on his ADP.
All right, let's move over to second base, and it seems like a plentiful position. Having Trey Turner up there at the top definitely helps, and there are a lot of really strong options in the mid to late rounds, whether you need a starting second baseman or a middle infielder. But just keep in mind that 16 of the top 20 second basemen in ADP are eligible at other positions. So it goes quicker than you think. A lot of those guys either have shortstop eligibility or Ketel Marte has outfield eligibility. So you'll notice the second base position, while there are a lot of strong options, they go quicker than you think. So Scott, we'll start with you this time. The second base position, what is your strategy? What do you find yourself doing?
I don't really feel like I have a good plan at second base. I feel like the plan for everything else just kind of takes over, and second base gets left out, which I mean, maybe goes to show you the improved depth at the position that I feel like I can do that. I think the second baseman I wind up drafting most often are probably like Jose Altuve, Brandon Lau. If Chris isn't in the draft, I tend to draft a lot of Ketel Marte. I think all three are going later than they should, which also speaks to the depth of the position. And at least for Altuve and Lau, they're only eligible at second base, so I don't have to worry about somebody scooping them up to play some other position. Ketel Marte is, of course, eligible in the outfield. And if I miss out on that whole tier, there's still Jorge Polanco. There's still Jonathan India, who I'm okay with. I know not everybody is, but I really like what he showed as a rookie. I like that he improved over the course of the season. I like that he walks a lot, and I like that he's not a 0 for stolen bases. So I'm okay with him as my starting second baseman. But it drops off pretty quickly after that. I don't know. I've just never found it's an issue, though. For me, even without putting a lot of emphasis on second base, I've never gotten burned at that position yet. But, in theory, I would not want to be the guy who, winds up having to start, I don't know, Jake Cronenworth there. I mean, honestly, that's not such a terrible outcome. I just think the upside's limited. So, yeah, I don't know. And it doesn't feel like that scary of a position this year.
All right, Chris, what do you think about second base? And do you find yourself winding up with anyone whose name doesn't rhyme with Schmarte?
Yeah. No, I definitely would draft Schmerner. I actually don't love second base as much as a lot of people do this year. I think there are a lot of players who are, if not overvalued, I think at least risky at their price. I don't really like Ozzie Albies at his price. I don't love Marcus Semien at his price.
Yeah, I agree with
I
both of those.
don't love Jorge Polanco at his price. I don't love Javier Baez. I don't love Jonathan India. So that's like half the top 12 in ADP that I'm just kind of very unlikely to draft. I'm drafting a lot of Whit Merrifield. I'm drafting a lot of Ketel Marte, obviously. I'm drafting a lot of Max Muncy at two different positions just because, I mean, if he plays, if he's healthy enough to play, it's kind of upsetting that we don't know for sure. But if he is healthy enough to play, he's going to be a steal where you get him in most drafts. So I'm willing to take that risk after the 100th pick, which is usually where you can find him.
I really don't think he's going to be healthy enough to play, but you know, that's obviously for you to decide with that pick.
Sorry, guys. Sandy Alcantara is still there at my pick. This TGFBI draft is just going unbelievably well. So I'm going to take Sandy Alcantara at 50th overall in the fourth round as my anchor starting pitcher. This draft is going incredibly well for me.
That is awesome, too.
Very happy about this. Sorry. Okay.
We have 49th in mine. I mean, just pointing it out there. He's slipped in mine, too. I didn't have a chance to take him because I was picking on the other side. But, yeah, interesting.
Back to second base. I don't love Tommy Edman. I don't love Jazz Chisholm at his price. So I'm more likely to make sure that I get my guy in Ketel Marte or Whit Merrifield. Just because I do think those guys have special skills. You know, Ketel Marte is, I think, one of the 3 or 4 best sources of batting average, and he's a legitimate power hitter. And Whit Merrifield, he's going to just rack up numbers, including stolen bases. So I like both of those guys quite a bit at this position, and I'm making them a priority.
All right, so Ketel Marte and Whit Merrifield for Chris.
What was that?
You never asked us our favorite first baseman to draft, Frank.
I know. Yeah, I was just going to go back to it now. But you can tell me now. Who you got, Scott?
It's Joey Votto, actually.
All right, Joey Votto for you, Chris. First baseman you target most?
Luke Voit.
Luke Voit. All right. So Chris, you just spoke about who you like at second base. Scott, do you have a second baseman you find yourself targeting most?
Probably Jose Altuve is the one I like to draft most, but it's not a very strong preference like it is at other positions.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's nah, I'm just gonna keep saying every time I say I'm with you, I'm gonna think back to our start.
I know, I've made you conscious of it now. So you're gonna think twice about saying it.
I know.
Made it awkward.
I just said it. I'm like, I can't.
I'm with you, Scott. That's what you were trying to say.
No, I will not say it. Anyway, Ketel Marte is the one that I would like to target most in the early rounds if I can. And then if I miss out on him, I found myself waiting quite a while. And hold your nose, but Gene Segura and Colton Wong, I find myself winding up with these guys a lot. I've been doing some deeper drafts, so maybe that's the reason why. But even in 12-team leagues, Segura and Colton Wong, they both averaged 2.9 fantasy points per game last year, the same amount as Javier Baez. And I know they're not flashy, they're high floor plays. They both finished top 150 in Roto last season. Both of their ADPs are outside the top 200. So it just seems like easy profit. I know that they're not exciting players, but Segura, strong batting average, modest power and speed. Colton Wong, I think he can go 15 homers, 15 steals, 90 plus runs if he stays healthy. So if you really wait on the position, I do like those guys. The third base strategy, arguably, probably not arguable, the most shallow position in fantasy baseball this season. The top 3 is awesome, but after that, you're filled with a bunch of question marks. Chris, we will start with you. Your strategy at third base.
Yeah, if I can get one of that top 3, I'm perfectly happy to do so, and I will, make a priority of getting one of them if, oftentimes you'll have like Mike Trout still available when Rafael Devers or Manny Machado are there, or Mookie Betts or something like that. And like, if that happens, I'm going to take the guys who I think are just better players. But the reason I'm very likely to try to take one of those top 3 is just, I don't like Austin Riley or Nolan Arenado as much as everyone else does. There's a 42 pick gap difference between Manny Machado and Austin Riley in my overall rankings in Roto. I have Austin Riley 60th, Manny Machado 18th. So I'm just not necessarily buying what he did. I think Nolan Arenado is arguably, if it's not Jazz Chisholm, I think Nolan Arenado is arguably the scariest player inside of the top 100 right now. He does not hit the ball with much quality right now, and so he's completely sold out for power, and I just think the margin for error is extremely slim for him. After that, I'm actually okay with the next tier, though. I like Adalberto Mondesi in a Roto league. I think he's worth the gamble at his price. I think Alex Bregman, Anthony Rendon, Chris Bryant are all fine values at their price. I think they're all worth the prices that they're going for. So I don't mind it. And even, some of the cheaper third basemen, if they start to fall, like DJ LeMahieu or Josh Donaldson, Justin Turner, Luis Arias, there's stuff here that makes me not willing to pay the premium for the two players in that middle class. It's really just Austin Riley and Nolan Arenado that I'm staying away from.
Chris, I just want to follow up quickly on Arenado. And I feel like his batted ball metrics have always been kind of middling, right? Even when he was in Coors Field. So obviously that helps him more because,
right. The thing
inflated, so on and so forth. But I mean, this is kind of the player he's always been, right? So
yes, the thing is he's always had this fly ball and pull heavy approach, and he's never had like outstanding batted ball metrics. He's never been someone who hits the ball super hard. He's never been someone who hits the ball super hard consistently. The difference is now that he's not in Coors Field, he's just a home run guy. Like, you're basically the only things you can really count on him to be even average at is home runs and RBI. Like, he's going to be a below average source of batting average. He scored 81 runs last season despite 38 homers. He had a 314 on base percentage or something.
He's going to be above average. Like, he's not just going to be average in home runs and RBI.
Right. But what I'm saying is if the home runs, if either the power production slips a little bit or he's just on the bad side of variance on home runs and he hits 33 instead of 38, which is not a big difference. That's one home run a month. It's going to get really ugly.
I think he hit only 34 last year.
38 last year, I thought.
34 last year.
34. Okay, you're right.
But, I mean, that further proves your point. If he loses one per month, then he's down to 29. So
right. And so it's just, I just think there is such a slim margin for error where if he just has a decent power season, then like what if he hits 30 home runs? You're probably getting
how many
90 RBI.
How many third basemen are going to hit 30 home runs though?
Right. But you don't have to pay for there are guys like Matt Chapman can give you 240, 28 homers and 90 RBI. And that might not be that much worse than Arenado.
But you're obviously counting on a big bounce back for him to do.
Right, but you're going to pay 140 picks difference.
I know, but then what if it doesn't happen? Then what do you do?
I don't think Nolan Arenado is a special player anymore. Is really what it is. And
yeah, he's not a special player, but I don't think the
care
price tag
about
is asking him to be a special player anymore.
I think you're passing on much better players in the range Arenado's going to have to draft him.
I don't know. I don't know that relative to the position that's true. And this is the position where I think Chris and I disagree the most because
I just don't care that much about position scarcity.
Yeah, like I think it's been a long time since we've seen a non-catcher position where you can be left holding the bag. Like you just get shut out there and are having to make do with waiver fodder all season long. And so if Salvador Perez is the biggest singular advantage you could get in any position, I think I put it at 6, one of the top actually 5. One of the top 5 third basemen is the second biggest advantage you could get at third base. And I'm including Austin Riley and Nolan Arenado in that. Maybe they have some risk. I don't think Austin, and I know Chris and I disagree about this. I don't really see bottom out potential for Austin Riley. I think he could slump to it. He hit 303 last year, I believe. He could end up hitting like 270 with 30 homers instead of 303 with 33 home runs. And, obviously that would be worse. We could argue whether that makes him worth his draft position or not. But I think he'll be one of the standouts at his position, clearly. because there are so few candidates for that. And then Arenado, particularly if he slides at, out, if he slides to around 70th, like round 6, let's say, I feel pretty good about what he did in his first year in St. Louis because it played out. Looking at his batted ball profile in Colorado, trying to figure out how that would play outside of Colorado, it went basically the way I expected. He elevates the ball and pulls it enough that the home run total remains high, but his batting average suffers. And I think given the state of the position, that is a player I can live with, and I'd rather go ahead and just take him.
I don't disagree that it's a player you can live with. I just don't think I'm taking a player I can live with in the 5th or 6th round.
It depends how you feel about what comes after, because I'm not sure I can live with what comes after. Alex
I'm perfectly happy with Justin Turner. I'm perfectly happy with Josh Donaldson. Like, I think Josh Donaldson and a replacement player could come really close to giving you what Nolan Arenado does.
It's possible, but it feels like just a coin flip chance to me. And like, I'd rather
much lower.
I'd rather not suffer at that position all year, I guess is what it comes down to, because at other positions, I don't like beyond the point where Arenado goes, well beyond the point where Austin Riley goes. Every position has plenty of options still that I'm confident in. And look, if I don't end up with Arenado or Riley or Machado, I'd probably take it the round 2-3 turn. I've decided I'd take him over Zach Wheeler and Shane Bieber, except maybe in a points league. If it doesn't work out, I'll obviously cross my fingers on an Anthony Rendon or a Matt Chapman much later in the hopes of a bounce back. I mean, a couple of those guys are going to bounce back. Yohan Moncada would be in that category as well. Alex Bregman, I don't know that he necessarily has to bounce back. He just needs to stay healthy, but he's obviously not going to be that 30-homer MVP candidate that we are used to seeing, or at least I don't think he's going to be. In points leagues, he walks so much that I would go ahead and tier him with Arenado and Riley and make it a top 6 at the position. I'll do that for Bregman in a points league. But in a roto league, he doesn't, I don't think he has the kind of power potential with the new ball that, would make him any kind of difference maker at the position, really. So, and then I guess Chris Bryant's there too, but I'm worried about him and wondering if he really has 30-homer potential anymore. So, I don't know. I'd just rather, by the time Arenado tends to go off the board, I feel like we tend to see a drop in hitter quality anyway. So I find that he's somebody I draft a lot.
All right. I'd love to get the top 3. I think most people would this season. Really the top 9 if I can, ending with Bregman, Chris Bryant, Anthony Rendon. I'd love to get one of those. But if I miss out on them, I have wound up with quite a few Justin Turner shares so far this year. He was the 59th overall player in Roto last season. He averaged 3 fantasy points per game. He's getting up there in age, probably not going to play every day anymore, but when he plays, he's still pretty valuable. So, Chris, the third baseman you find yourself drafting most?
First baseman I'd find myself drafting Nolan Arenado, actually. No, probably Justin Turner or Anthony Rendon.
All right, Scotty?
I mean, it's been Austin Riley, I think, but I would say the one I'm most aiming for is probably Arenado.
All right, let's hit a quick break. And before we do that, I want to remind everyone we have a live mock draft coming up on our YouTube channel Tuesday night. That's March 1st at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. 12-team Roto League this time. Scott, Chris, and myself will be there, so you can come watch live at youtube.com/fantasybaseball today. But also, these mocks will now be turned into 2-part podcasts for you to listen to on demand after the fact. So, of course, you're welcome to come watch us live and hang out, and it's a lot of fun usually. We got the draft board up, and you can follow everything that's going on. But, yes, they will be turned into on-demand podcasts as well. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, Shortstop here, Fantasy Baseball Today. All right, so let's take a look at shortstop, a loaded position. 14 shortstops going in the top 90 picks in ADP, and it feels like you can get a good one at any point of the draft. Even if you decide to wait, you can get, Willy Adames around pick 130, 140, sometimes 150. But yeah, there's fallback options. There's a lot of talent here at the position. Chris, we'll start with you. Your shortstop strategy. What do you got? You are muted, sir.
This is one position that I think you can kind of go without a strategy because it's so deep and because there are impact players. I mean, really, 120 picks deep potentially in the draft, if not more, depending on how you think of Jazz Chisholm or Dansby Swanson. Like there are really, really good players up and down the shortstop position. And so it's the position that I think you can, if the right guy is there, if you have the number one pick, you can take Fernando Tatis. But if you don't want to take one early, Xander Bogaerts in the third or fourth round is a really, really nice player to have on your team. So I don't think you really have to have a strategy. I think shortstop is so good that if you do have a strategy, it might just be take as many shortstops as possible, because you could put Fernando Tatis in the outfield and Trey Turner at second base and then draft Marcus Semien and then have there's just a lot of different ways you can go about it. So I think it's the one position that more than any other, you can kind of do whatever you want and you'll probably be in a really good position.
All right, Scotty, what do you think about shortstop this year? Do you maybe do the opposite of third base and avoid the position at times throughout the first 5 or 6 rounds, just because you know that there's so many options that you can get to later on?
Yeah, I do actually. It is such a deep position, and I don't feel that differently about Willy Adames than I do like Carlos Correa or even maybe Xander Bogaerts, and he goes, around 120th. So he's kind of the ultimate fallback for me if I just don't feel like any of the previous shortstops goes at an appropriate value for me. I don't overthink it in the first round. Basically there are 2 rounds worth of hitters that stand out so much from the rest of the hitter crop that I'm not really thinking about what position they play so much. So Fernando Tatis, certainly in a categories league, I'd take him number 1. Obviously you could bump him to outfield if you want to take a shortstop later. But I'm not worried about blocking shortstop, Trey Turner, Bo Bichette. Like that's just not really entering my thoughts. But after them, that next tier of shortstops, I don't want to pay up for any of them. I don't love the value of Tim Anderson. I definitely don't love the value of Francisco Lindor. I'll probably have 0 shares of him. I could see myself taking Corey Seager in because he tends to go among the later in that group, sometimes in like the round 5-6 range. And I think he might have as much or more upside as anybody in that group. Wander Franco in a points league, maybe. Carlos Correa, that's toward the end of the tier. And so I probably end up with a lot of him. But again, if it just doesn't work out for me to take one of those shortstops from that very large tier, then I'm fine with Willy Adames as my shortstop. I'm fine, frankly, with Bobby Witt as my shortstop. And it's just not a difficult position to fill because there are that many options. Even in a roto league where there's that middle infield spot, I've never come close to like getting left out of the position. Now, I haven't done a lot of 15-team drafts. Most of the listeners don't play in 15-team leagues. And maybe the position gets stretched quite a bit more there. But 12 teams or fewer, it's just not a position you have to stress about much.
Yeah, for sure. So you threw out a bunch of names there, Scotty. Is there one in particular you find yourself targeting most?
I mean, Willy Adames, I think, is the one I'm most excited to draft when I draft him. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean I have to wait for him and take him. I might take somebody earlier, but the value I just think is awesome for him. All
right, Chris, who you got?
Yeah, Willy Adames has ended up on my teams quite a bit. If not him, I've drafted a decent amount of Francisco Lindor. Tim Anderson is another one.
The 2 I said I don't like the value.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
I like it. This is the podcast where Scott and Chris are button heads. Wander Franco in a points league. I'd really like to target him if I can get him in the 5th round of a 12-team league. He averaged 3.3 fantasy points per game last season, and that was even with a slow start. So he had that tremendous on base streak. So any type of points league, OBP format, Wander Franco is going to be awesome there. Lindor, I'm about it. I'm buying the bounce back. I think he flashed something in September, provide you 12 to 15 steals. I think strong counting stats, 25 to 30 home runs. I'm in on Lindor and Willy Adames. Look, if Willy Adames has a bad year, we might all have a bad year, but I'm in, and it sounds like we're all kind of on the same page there. Let's get to outfield. This is a stacked position up top, but feels like it kind of falls off of a cliff once you get to the 30th, 35th outfielder range there. So the Mitch Haniger, Jesse Winker, Kyle Schwarber range of the outfield position, it kind of feels like it falls off of a cliff. Scott, what do you think about outfield this year, and particularly your strategy in 3 outfielder leagues? So that's most head-to-head points and head-to-head category leagues. Do you maybe avoid the position early because you only start 3 outfielders?
Yeah, because you only start 3. And like, there is never, in a league that shallow, outfield never really dries up. I mean, it might appear to in the draft, but there are just so many 90 outfield spots in the league. There are so many opportunities for outfields to emerge, to break through, that they're going to be popping up on the waiver wire all the time. So I don't want to risk filling the position too soon and block myself from taking some of the value I like late. And B, I just don't want to be that heavily invested in the outfield, particularly in a 3 outfielder league, because it's not at all uncommon for me to just construct my outfield on the fly. Like, I think, so I had in the podcast listeners league last year, which is a 3 outfielder points league, I had the highest scoring team. Didn't make the playoffs, but I had the highest scoring team. And my outfield was like, it ended up being like Hunter Renfroe and Robbie Grossman, and I don't know, it was Mark Canna for a while. It was just guys that was cycling through on the waiver wire. And I'm not saying that's the optimal way to do it, but that is certainly a way to do it. It's always going to be an option for you. So I tend not to draft them early. Of course, if it's the right time, if I pick in the right spot for Juan Soto in the first round, I'll take Juan Soto. Mike Trout, I'll take Mike Trout. I'm not going to overthink it with those early round picks again. But I am, if that doesn't happen, I'm probably taking somebody like Brian Reynolds as my number 1 outfielder, or maybe even like Kyle Schwarber, maybe one of the last of that group of 30 that you're talking about, Frank, before a drop off, and have one of those guys, and then just kind of piece together my outfield after that.
Does anybody else think that Scott is upset that he didn't make the playoffs in that league last year? Every time you bring it up, Scott, you're like, well, I had the most points in the league, but I didn't make the playoffs.
Well, I had a good team. And I just got squeezed out for no good reason. I think it was a situation where like wasn't it a situation where like a division winner had to make it, and the division winner had a worse record than me?
Yeah,
or something like that.
That's the Points Podcast League. We definitely have to revise some things there. There should not be divisions in any type of head-to-head format. Divisions go, you're gone. And one of the playoff spots, I believe, should go to the highest point scorer, whatever. If it's 4 teams make the playoffs, it's the top 3 records, and then the 4th one is the highest point scorer after that. That's how I like to play. Chris, when it comes to 5 outfielder leagues, what is your strategy this season in that format?
I'm not worried about filling up my outfield spots too early in that league. The thing about outfield is, like, I've got 15 players in my top 30 overall are in the outfield position in a roto league. So I just don't think you can go wrong drafting too many of them. Like, yeah, you run the risk of reaching a point in your draft where the best players are all outfielders or the best hitters are all outfielders. And then that can be frustrating when you don't have the spots for them. But in a 5 outfielder league with dual eligibility and all that, I'm not too worried about it. If I end up with 3 outfielders in my first 5 picks, I can still make that work. It's such a good position. You tend to, like last season, right fielders had the highest OPS in the majors among all positions collectively. higher even than DH and first base. And you've got, stolen base guys, and you've got you can find whatever you need at outfield. And so like shortstop, it's the kind of thing where I'm not going in with a specific advantage or a specific plan. I think you go into the draft with a plan at positions where you might find scarcity. So third base or catcher, like that's the places that you need to have a plan. But first base or shortstop and outfield, you can kind of just play it by, how the draft goes and take obvious values. And a lot of the times those are going to be outfielders, at every point in the draft. So I'm not necessarily looking to avoid filling up the spots and not necessarily looking to take them early, but if I end up with 4 outfielders in my top 40 or top 30, that's fine. That's a good way to make your team really good. There's a lot of I feel like and this is obviously a philosophical thing that Scott and I disagree on this season, specifically with third base, but I just kind of feel like there's a lot of you have to try to make the puzzle pieces fit, and sure, but you also just want the best players. And a lot of the best players are at outfield. So I don't know if you want to overthink it in any way like that.
All right, Chris, do you have an outfielder you find yourself targeting most?
Yeah. I mean, Byron Buxton, Ketel Marte.
The brand, baby, the brand.
But actually, I'm drafting a lot of Christian Yelich. I've moved both him and Cody Bellinger, actually, I moved up recently. They were 2 of the biggest movers in my rankings update last week. Christian Yelich all the way up to 63rd overall. Cody Bellinger 78th. And basically that's me just saying, you know what? Maybe it's not 100% that they bounce back, but if those 2 guys are right, they have as much difference-making potential as anyone. And I'm not going to draft Christian Yelich in the 5th round or 6th round because I'm not going to need to. But I rank them that way to make sure that when it comes time to draft them in the 8th round or the 9th round, I'll be there around ahead of someone because I do want both of those guys on my team just for that breakout potential, that bounce back potential. Because, I mean, it can be easy to forget how freaking good Christian Yelich was in 2018 and 2019. I mean, he was on 2019, he was hitting 330 with a 50 homer, almost 40 stolen base pace, right? His numbers were absolutely absurd. So if he can get anywhere close to that, he missed the last 30 games of the season. If he can get anywhere close to that, I love having Christian Yelich on my team.
Yeah, he went 44 homers, 30 steals in 130 games. So
50 homer, 35 steal pace.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. No, it's great. Look, it comes down to health mostly for both of these guys. I would say the back injury is probably a little bit more worrisome for me, for Yelich, but yeah, if he's healthy, I think the sky is the limit once again for both of those guys. Scotty, do you have an outfielder or 2 you find yourself targeting most?
I would say I'm targeting Cedric Mullins a surprising amount, even in points leagues. But probably the one I'm most excited to draft is Brian Reynolds. Oh, you know what? No, it's not. It's Kyle Schwarber. Almost overlooked my guy, Kyle.
One of the biggest risers for me in my most recent update too. You talked me into it.
Yeah, I think he's going to hit more than 40 homers this year. Probably bat around 260, maybe even higher, and just Pete Alonso numbers 8 rounds later.
Alrighty. Chris, I will remind you that George Springer plays outfield, so I feel
gosh, yeah, George Springer also. But that's what I'm saying. It's I really, really like the outfield position. He's my number 13 outfielder, number 28 overall player. So I might have 4 outfielders in my first 6 picks if it's the right combination of guys, and I'm perfectly pleased with it.
Alrighty. Yeah, for me, I want to draft as much Luis Robert as I could possibly wind up with. The problem is he goes in the 2nd round when I want to get those third basemen. But yeah, typically if those third basemen are gone, I'm going to look for Luis Robert. And later on in the draft, Cody Bellinger. I want to take the shot. 1 year further removed from the shoulder injury last year, looked a little bit better in the postseason. was hitting fastballs much better in that small sample size. So I've got some faith that Cody Bellinger can get back on track. We've got starting pitcher and relief pitcher. So what we'll do is I'll ask Scotty for starting pitcher strategy. I'll ask Chris for relief pitcher strategy. And then
you're not going to get much out of me at relief pitcher. I got to be honest.
Well, we won't have much time for you to give anything.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's true. It's true.
Yes, starting pitcher. Okay. Yeah, no, this is I'm going to be able to take a bite out of this apple in 5 minutes, I'm sure. So, starting pitcher is looking a lot more stable than it has in the past couple years. I've referred to it before as the return of the middle class, and it being more of a upper middle class than a lower middle class. And so I want to lean into that. I don't see as much distinction between the early round starting pitchers as sort of the mid-tier starting pitchers as in past years. So I'm probably not going to be the guy taking Garrett Cole in round 1 or, Zach Wheeler in round 2. At least in a categories league. Points league is kind of a different story because there are so few hitter spots to fill. I would be more aggressive at starting pitcher in a points league. But this year, I'm more forming my pitching staff from guys who are certainly capable of ace level production, but they just don't cost as much. So, Charlie Morton is, of course, my favorite, but it's likely I'm going to draft a pitcher before him, somebody like Kevin Gausman in this draft, or Aaron Nola, or Sandy Alcantara, maybe even Robbie Ray. And, then go with the Charlie Morton, hopefully come back with a third pitcher who I think is capable of ace upside, like a Max Fried or a Frankie Montas I like a lot. Justin Verlander's kind of the last of that group. And hopefully that basically comes out to 3 of my top 30 at the position. Probably not any of my top 5, but 3 of my top 30. And then go really heavy at what's the true middle class at the position, which is like 31 to 55 in my rankings. It includes guys like Ranger Suarez and Adam Wainwright and Chris Bassett and Pablo Lopez. All these guys, I think, have high-end potential themselves. I mean, Adam Wainwright was a top 10 pitcher in both formats last year. And if I can have 7 pitchers, 6 or 7, let's say, of those top 55, I feel pretty good about how my pitching staff's going to perform. And then I like to come in at the end and grab that Kyle Hendricks, Carlos Carrasco, Zach Greinke forgotten ace trio that for some reason has just gotten buried because they had one bad year. If I can get 2 or perhaps even all 3 of those guys to add to that top 7, I'm going to be fine. Like maybe one of those guys is done. Maybe 2 of those guys are done, but there's a good chance any of them could bounce back with top 25 type numbers at the position again. So that's how I approach starting pitcher this year. Not putting a premium on it like the past couple years, but not like neglecting it either. Just kind of hedging my bet with what I think is now a very large middle class.
I think I know the answer to this question, Scott, but the starting pitcher you wind up with most?
Charlie
Morton. I think in the mock drafts that we do together, we're probably all going to be duking it out for the services of Charlie Morton, but rightfully so. He is one of the best values this season. Chris, maybe a name other than Charlie Morton that you find yourself drafting most?
A name other than Charlie Morton that I find myself drafting the most. We'll go down a little bit. I would say Trevor Rogers is a name that I find myself drafting a lot because I really do believe in the skills that he showed last season. So that's my guy.
All right, and let's stick with the Marlins. Sandy Alcantara for me. If you listen to Starting Pitcher Preview Part 1, then you know the deal. I think it's an ideal blend of volume and skills and change the pitch mix last year. The strikeouts were up over the final 13 starts. The swinging strike rate was up. I think he is just progressing as a starting pitcher, and for some reason, people are sleeping on that. Maybe it's because he plays for the Marlins, so they think he's not going to get wins, which is a possibility. I get that, but man, you're talking about one of maybe 5 or 10 starting pitchers we can actually expect 200 plus innings from this season.
Frank, they lost one of the great winners of all time. this morning. So
That's
I don't
true.
know how many games they're going to win without Derek Jeter.
Yeah. R2 spect, right? R2 spect. That probably makes
Re2 pecked.
Re2 pecked. Yeah. Yeah. Look, he wants to win. The Marlins don't want to spend. That's what happens. Derek Jeter, you're out of here, kid. All right, relief pitcher strategy. Chris, I know you don't want to talk about it, but I need you. I need you to talk about it here. Let's go.
Look, I can.
From a head-to-head points league perspective, because obviously you can use Sparps in that league. Those are starting pitchers who have relief pitcher eligibility. But in a categories league, you probably want to compete in saves, Chris. So how do you attack those two differently?
I mean, in this marketplace, it's so difficult to do so because saves are so expensive right now in drafts. And I don't think it's really all that logical the way people are going after saves right now. I know part of it is that a lot of the drafts that have happened right now are draft and holds or non-fab leagues where you don't get to add guys. But even in these TGFBI leagues that we're doing, we're seeing multiple relievers go in the top 25 or top 30 in most drafts. And I can't bring myself to pay that price. So I'm probably not going to be paying up for one of the high-end relievers this year. And I think the likeliest thing is just I'm going to have to try to play the reliever roulette later on in drafts and target guys like, I don't know, Scott Barlow and Kenley Jansen tends to go later right now, and I think he'll end up being a closer, so I'm fine with him. But Blake Trinan or Dylan Floro, Taylor Rogers, guys like that, who I think will be good if they are the closer, and just with the understanding that you're probably going to have to cycle through a lot of options early in the season to get there. And I don't know, maybe it's worth making Liam Hendricks your second round or third round pick, but I just can't bring myself to do it. There's so much that can go wrong for closers, even the really, really good ones. Like, it's unlikely that Liam Hendricks loses his job, but he's still a pitcher, so he's still injury prone. He's still like, there's too many different ways that one of those high-end closers can lose their job for me to justify the kind of cost they're doing for the impact that you're going to get from them, which is one category and then pretty minimal in
contribution.
I can't think of it. Contributions in three other categories, maybe.
Right. Scott, in a minute or less, head-to-head points leagues, do you find yourself targeting Sparps in that format? Do you have to get one of those, or are you okay just waiting and grabbing closers?
Ranger Suarez.
I don't have to, but those are the only ones that I'm gonna pay for in a head-to-head points leagues where everybody just has two reliever spots. Yeah. I'll draft Ranger Suarez at the appropriate time, Luis Severino at the appropriate time, maybe even Cal Quantrill at the appropriate time. But otherwise, if I'm just taking a closer, I'm just taking the best of what's left, because there is going to be something left when there's only 24 reliever spots to fill.
All righty. With that, Scotty, who is a relief pitcher you draft most?
Probably Scott Barlow. I'm pretty confident he's the Royals closer. He's a good strikeouts guy, and he doesn't get drafted like he is the Royals closer. Like he does have a for sure closer role. So Scott Barlow.
All right, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with the first name. Chris, you have who is a relief pitcher you find yourself drafting?
Can I say Sparps?
Sure.
Luis Severino. I'm going to have a lot of Luis Severino. I already do. And Michael Kopech. I just think there's a chance that if Michael Kopech's in the rotation for an extended amount of time this season, there's just a chance he's one of the best pitchers in baseball for however long he's in the rotation.
All righty. Yeah, for me, I do like grabbing Will Smith, the closer for the Braves. I know home runs were an issue for him last year, but he is the last of the closers drafted in a group where I have relative confidence in his job security. So everyone else that you feel pretty good about their job security, they go much earlier than Will Smith. So I like the value there on him. And Taylor Rogers, he's proven it in the past. He could be a legit closer. He finished as a top 12 reliever in fantasy back in 2019. He had 30 saves, and his underlying numbers were actually better last year than they've ever been. So Taylor Rogers is someone I like quite a bit as well. All right, we're going to wrap there. well, you know, we're still kind of getting back on track here, but the further we get away from the position previews, I'm sure that we'll bring down the total here in terms of minutes on the podcast. So I'm sorry, Scott. I know you're looking forward to that. For Scott,
wrap it up.
For Scott and Chris,
no, wrap it up, B.
Don't do that, Chris. Come on. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening.
You're too young for that one, Frank.
Fantasy baseball today. We'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.